let's look at the top 10 trends now, Ruchir, looking ahead at 2022. The first thing you're saying, 2022, we will all see a decline in global birth rates, and that will accelerate in 2022. And some of the data looks like this. Just have a look at it.
Yeah. So, Prannoy, one of the fascinating things about this crisis has been, this entire pandemic, is that if you look at most crises in the past, typically after the crisis breaks out, the world is turned upside down. A defining feature of this crisis is that many of the trends that were already in place before the pandemic broke out have merely been accelerated by this pandemic. Now, some of those trends completely make sense, such as increased digitization with people working more from home. So that makes sense. But this thing, I think, has been a bit counterintuitive, which is that we are seeing a decline in birth rates take place around the world in a fairly sharp way. Why is that happening? I think that's something which we really need to know a bit more about, or need to learn a bit more about, because you would expect that as people are spending more time at home, birth rates should increase. Instead, birth rates are falling sharply. The most they have fallen in recent times has been during the pandemic. You can see the data here for China and even places like the United States, that the birth rates are falling here. So the demographic challenge that the world has been facing has only been accelerated by this pandemic, and that has, I think, serious implications for economic growth. We keep on talking, why can't countries like India grow at 7 to 8%? Why can't countries like the United States grow at 3 to 4%? Well, it's because the demographics have shifted significantly. The number of countries now which have a shrinking working age population has exploded. And this is true even in India. The working age population is not shrinking. But if you look at what's happened during the pandemic here, that we don't have data for the entire country, but we managed to get some data just for the city of Bombay. And you can see during the pandemic, there's been such a sharp decline in the birth rates in a place like Bombay. I feel that's pretty representative of what must be happening in the rest of India.
Yes, that is really astounding. That 153 is the annual average rate for those 5 years, and now it's just dropped dramatically. And in fact, it's dropped so much that India's birth rate for the first time is below the global average birth rate. That is incredible, that data.
Exactly. I mean, can you imagine that the amount of time that we have spent fretting about the demographic time bomb in India? We all grew up hearing about that, 70s, 80s. And now the picture has changed so dramatically, where the slowdown in the birth rates has been so significant that India's population growth rate now is also getting to levels which is likely to fall below the global averages. But interestingly, the birth rate for the first time now has already fallen below the global average.
That is an amazing change of perception,
yes, and
that everybody must recognize fast.
Yeah, and one very important point to put here, this is for me the single most important reason why India will not be able to grow on a sustained basis at 7, 8 or 9%. No country with a birth rate this low and with a population growth in such a decline has been able to grow rapidly. I think this is a point which is just not internalized by many people here. Forget policymakers, even serious economists, when they go on talking to me about why India can grow at 8 to 9%, the problem is that no country with demographics of this kind has ever been able to grow at a rate of 8 to 9%. Just doesn't happen.
Very interesting point, because you talked about this earlier, that your workforce is also not growing, which you need if you want to grow by 7, 8, 9, 10%, right?
Yes, I mean, you need your working age population to be growing by well over 2% to achieve those kind of growth rates. And of course, India can try and correct for those things. For example, one thing which we can speak about at some other point in time is that the female participation in India's labor force surprisingly keeps falling, and that's another factor we need. But the big message here is that it's very difficult for India's growth rate now to be anywhere north of 5 to 6%, given the changing demographics.